Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition. I am your host, Charlie Murphy, Director of MTCA. That's Musical Theater College Auditions. Check us out at MTCA.com. And today we've got Erika Strasburg on the podcast to talk a bit of wellness and psychological competitiveness in this process. I have been promising this episode for the past few, and I've been doing little intros to kind of speak toward it. But this episode, I'm going to let speak for itself because I think we get into a lot of this good stuff. I know our seniors are right now in the middle of Chicago Unifieds, many prepping for LA this weekend as this releases. We are so excited to see you at both of those events, though, as I say in the episode, only if that makes sense for you to see us. For you as a person / auditioner, does it make sense for you to come and stop by the green room? No shame in stopping by only at the end if you prefer, as Erika says in the episode, or whatever works best for you. I promise we won't judge you. I do believe I'm going to attempt a few person on the street style interview moments in Chicago, or maybe person in the green room style interviews. I thought about doing it in New York, but just the chaos of the weekend, it overtook me a bit. I did think about it, but now I'm planning at least to do it. But a few students did request it in New York City, so we try to give the people what they want. I'm not going to make the mistake of promising a release date at any specific time this year, unlike the previous time, but we're going to try to put something together and release it in some form, whether that's audio, video, however, you'll likely get some person on the street interviews from this class of 2025. We try to make it happen for you. So to my seniors, much of this interview is focused specifically on advice to you. I love you, and I can't wait to see you this week, or it has been this week as I release it, though as I record this, it's about to be this week. And to my juniors and younger, we're going to see you this month at Junior Intensive. We are really pumped for it and really pumped for this year. I mentioned last episode, we're really excited for some of the new stuff that we've got planned for your class as we keep trying to tweak and improve things on our end. We're never done growing. We're not going to stop, And to those non-MTCA students out there, or anybody who knows any non-MTCA students out there, if you want to forward this message to them, if you have been looking for an opportunity to meet us, we are hosting one of our Meet MTCA workshops on February 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's a week from now as this episode releases. That's February 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up by heading to our website, which you all know by now is mtca.com, and it is completely free. No obligation beyond sitting down for that hour. And we won't even make you sit down for it. If you want to walk around during the webinar, you absolutely can. You get to meet me live, as well as a bunch of members of our artistic team. And you'll get to see a window into how this process works with examples of song, monologue, and dance coaching. You're going to leave with some questions answered. You're going to leave with a better understanding of the expectations of the process. And you're going to leave with some homework for what lies ahead. So I think regardless of whether you choose to move forward, and again, there's no obligation beyond this webinar, regardless of whether you move forward with MTCA, I think you'll find it a really helpful webinar. And again, it's free, just like this podcast, and you don't even have to listen to like random advertisements that you have to click bloop, bloop, bloop through. Though, of course, don't do that. Don't click through the VPN ads. Listen to those things. Go see those shows. I mean, that's what the podcast is doing for you. All right, we're getting loopy. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was a fun one with a lot of really helpful nuggets, I think. Please take care of yourselves out there this week, this winter, and in general. If you take one thing from this conversation about wellness, it's that wellness is not just about frou-frou self-care because it'll make you feel better. It really is about how to elevate yourself as an artist and to elevate your success. Taking care of yourself is competing at the highest level. Those two are one and the same. Okay, without further ado, here is Erika Strasburg. Well, we are so excited to have the great Erika Strasburg on the podcast. Erika has a BFA from CMU. She's worked in all kinds of places like Pittsburgh CLO, Pittsburgh Public Theater, the Kinetic Theater Company, where she played opposite yours truly to rave reviews. Right. Truly a life accomplishment. She's also a board-certified health and wellness coach, a certified adolescent mental health coach, a DBT skills coach, and I may make her define those words for you, and MTCA's own wellness coach, covering a lot of these umbrellas. Erika, welcome on the pod. Again, how are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. I'm great. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah. Well, and we had you on for like a brief commercial like 2 years ago. We were doing an upcoming webinar. And we're like, we should just give a little intro to wellness as an idea. And we just had Carrie Anderson, who's a therapist, on. And so we're like, oh, maybe we'll have Erika back on. And now here we are. It's time for your starring role. Do you feel like
We're
you've
doing
truly
it.
made it? It's great.
I have. Yeah, this is it.
I have two main missions for today's episode. So I want to talk about wellness in general, especially wellness at this time of year. They've heard me say this the past month. It's, we're talking about the psychological wellness of January, but also the physical wellness of January and February and how important all of that is. And then in the second half, I want to talk a little bit more just about psychological competitiveness from an audition and a holistic process perspective, both of which I think those things are going to interrelate a little bit there. So I was really inspired to bring you on again at this moment from our conversation, our last wellness webinar, which some people would have gotten a chance to tune into. But if you're more of a podcast person and not an MTCA webinar person, this will be your first introduction to that. But then also we did a little bit with Cara Rose DiPietro. And I thought, that was the one that I was thinking would be helpful to kind of continue that conversation. So I made you listen to that episode before we talked. And this can be a bit of a continuance of all of that. Okay, but before we get into all the wellness stuff, can you give us a brief catch up on your journey to get to this? So I would love, first, could you give me like birth to college in 60 seconds, everything we need to know about you, and then we'll do like an act 2 of college now. But so first, give me like a 60 seconds of Erika getting to Carnegie Mellon, what we need to know about you.
Big sports gal, super soccer heavy. My dad was a professional soccer player.
Yep.
So he coached us, played in high school, loved it, thought maybe I might play soccer in college. I was like, man, that's where I'm headed.
Mm-hmm.
Did some camps when I was little. And then in high school, I really got into choir. And that was sort of the gateway drug. Did my musical senior year. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this.
Yep. And so this will fit well in our sports analogies, our sports metaphors of it all.
Yeah.
And then how'd you find your way to Carnegie Mellon?
I thought that's where Kristen Chenoweth went. So I had seen Wicked, original cast. Okay. Original cast. And that's important. And I was in love with her. And I don't know why. I heard she went to Carnegie Mellon. Otherwise, I would have never heard of what Carnegie Mellon was. I have no relation to Pittsburgh.
That's so funny.
And I was like, oh, Kristen Chenoweth went there. That's where I'll go. And then find out that's not where she went at all.
I wonder where you did get. Was it because were you young enough that it could have been like Meghan Hilty who did go there?
Maybe
replaced her? Yeah.
I feel like I had read it or heard it and I was like, Carnegie Mellon, what's that? Well, that's the place for me.
Yep. I love it.
And there we went. Very green. I was very green.
Our truly expert listeners will know that Kristen went to OKCU, both of whom we're currently scheduling to have on the podcast. We're scheduling OKCU right now. It's going to happen next week. And then we're also scheduling Kristen to actually come on the podcast as well. Not to give too much of a preview and a promise, because who knows with all these people, but that was a great little segue.
She'll be there.
She'll be there. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, so then take me through college to now, to give me a little bit of like your journey to how we get to where we are right now as a working actor and a wonderful young mother and all those things. Give me a little bit of your post-collegiate journey as well.
Yeah. So college was weird and wonderful. I had a hard time with the size of the class. The smallness was both great and tough for me. Everyone in my business was kind of tough for me. And I think that was sort of the start of me being interested in this work. And I wasn't a big partier. And so trying to see how I fit in, that was kind of the start of all of this. I got into sometimes I was eating too much. Sometimes I wasn't eating enough. That kind of started that part of this whole thing. So that was really how the seed got planted, I think, looking back. And then post-college, I was just not ready for New York. I was too green still, a little scared of it. And so I chose to stay regional. I started in Philly and then I went to Pittsburgh and just wanted to build up my resume. And it worked out really well. I grew a lot doing that. It kind of little unconventional path, but it worked out nicely for me. And then eventually ended up in New York where I have my agent now. And I still love working regionally. And especially now that I'm a mom, I think that's probably where I'll stay. But it's been great. It's just super across the board. Some really weird in the basement experiences and some really, high level opposite Jen Colella and Mr. Sheffield experiences. So sort of run the gamut. That's what you get regionally, which is great.
That's what you get. And I can underline the not partier part of this when we worked together, which I can't believe it didn't come up in your, obviously that's the most important part of your 60 seconds.
The peak of my career.
20 of those seconds should have been on Kinetic Media Company. But yeah, I remember we used to be like, let's go out after the show. You're like, I'd like to be asleep an hour ago.
Yeah,
like, okay,
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. And by 9.
Give me a little bit more, and I want to talk about the specifics of the wellness here in a second. But when you said like it was a little tough for me, people being in my business, what
Mhm.
was that experience like for you at college? It's one of the things we talked a little bit with Kara, where I was like, maybe we should do more of this on like the transition into college. We spent a lot of time talking about the transition out of college into what it is to be a
Yeah.
professional and the morass and all that. But just transitioning into college and that intimate conservatory style class, what was difficult about that for you?
Well, you come from your high school where you're the star mostly. I think like pretty much every, especially MTCA kid, it's like you're one of the stars
Yeah,
of
we
your high
only accept
school.
stars. That's right. That's one of the
That's right.
prerequisites.
Yeah,
Must be a star.
prerequisite.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then you get to somewhere like Carnegie and everyone's amazing. And so
Yep.
you're immediately very humbled, sort of intimidated. I kind of was like, oh, whoa,
Yep.
and some people had gone to performing arts high school. Again, I was really new to it. So I had a
Yep.
little imposter syndrome, like, ooh, I'm not sure. How did I get in here?
Yep.
And then, that kind of went away and I felt like, okay, I do belong. And then, but it was the class size wherein you're making mistakes in college socially, you're going through a lot mentally and emotionally at that time of your life, discovering who you are. And I just felt like everyone knew everything I did. I just couldn't really hide if I made a mistake or if I hurt someone's feelings or, vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knew about it the next day. And that was hard for me because I just wasn't used to that.
Yep.
And luckily I found my Katie Wieland. You find your people and then it helps so much. And I look back super fondly. I don't look back
Yep.
on that time as like overall difficult, but
Yep.
there were some growing pains for sure. For
And do you
sure.
think it's because you're a particularly private person? Like, are you the kind of person who would want to have that really small group of intimate friends, and sort of having this bigger group community felt a little bit overwhelming?
Yeah. I wasn't used to the theater personality. I wasn't used to that, just being around sort of that big energy all the time.
Yep.
And so you get to school and everybody kind of has that big energy and you're like,
Yep.
whoa, it's fantastic. It's exhilarating. It's very exciting, but you're
Yep.
also like, yeah, if that's not what
Overstimulating.
you're used to.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of an adjustment. Socially, you find your way. You always find your people. And what's great about any program is there's a huge variety of personalities, right?
Yep.
But that was really important to me because there were some moments I really felt like very lonely and then you find your people and it feels a lot warmer.
Yep. Well, and it gets to some of that. We'll talk in the second half more about sort of competitiveness in general and whether how we use that C word or not. In terms of I love that the athlete part of you, but then there is just naturally in this business and in any of these environments, there's going to be a bit of like comparing yourself to your peers. I mean, it's something you can't
Totally.
fight completely. Somebody gets cast, somebody doesn't. It's just like that is what actually happens in any
Hmm.
class or whatever. So that's an interesting thing to try to navigate. But wait, let's zoom in forward a little bit. I just want to zoom. Now here you are as a wellness coach. You're certified in all these things. Can we talk a little bit about, like, for somebody who doesn't know what wellness is, or maybe especially, we've heard of like the wellness space now in general of like people doing yoga and sipping tea, and they have an idea of maybe what that is in terms of like Instagram. But like when you talk about the goals of wellness as it relates to an actor, why is this something that I should potentially spend some time focusing on and at least thinking about my wellness?
Yeah. So my experience that really was like, okay, you have to focus on this was I was in rehearsal for Peter Pan at CLO. That was with Jen Colella was our Peter Pan. Amazing. During the day from 9 to 6. And then at night, I was Belle in Beauty and the Beast at a different theater down the street. So it
Mm-hmm.
was all day, all night, leading a show opposite some real star. Like there was no room for error.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in my life, I was like not quite at my taking care of myself in the best way, like physically in terms of what I was eating, how I was moving my body, my sleep schedule. And also just mentally, I wasn't checking in with myself and I just couldn't afford. I had to figure it out quick,
Yep.
right? So that kind of started it. How do I get through, which for a lot of performers, that's your day. It's either you have a job and then you go perform, or you're in rehearsal and then you go perform. Like you
Yep.
have to kind of be at your peak all the time. And our body is our paycheck, our body is our craft, our
Yep.
your voice, all that. So it's all connected. And so I just was like, yeah, what is wellness? And then the pandemic hit and wellness became very trendy.
Yep.
So there are a lot of ways to look at wellness. For me, it's just like how to keep your mind and body in the best shape it can be in. And I don't mean shape like abs. I mean
Yep.
like connection to your spirit, connection to what you're putting in your body feels good, how you're moving your body feels good. Nothing is torture. There's not a lot of bad habits, like just kind of ironing all of that out.
Yep.
And it just makes everything so much more peaceful.
Yep.
Every part of your life.
It's so well said. And I think professional actors kind of will understand that intuitively. And I think we kind of understand that about like athletes. Like we know LeBron James spends $1 million on his body and gets in hyperbaric chambers, and Tom Brady won't eat a strawberry during the season, or some of those
no tomatoes.
No tomatoes. Is that it?
No tomatoes.
Inflammation. So people go to those higher levels, and I think people understand that at the Broadway level to some extent. Even I think some people say like, oh, I get that you have to vocally rest after these certain shows and when you're doing a particularly difficult role, but I'm not sure that every 18-year-old actor is thinking that way. And I'll say, going through this process, here we are in between New York City and Chicago Unifieds as we record this, people should be treating themselves that way. Like you are doing 4, 5, 6 auditions in a day. Like you do need to get to sleep immediately, and you do need to get up early enough and warm up. And some of those considerations, I don't know that people think, oh, that's for later. That's for when I'm LeBron James, when I'm, Sutton Foster and I'm doing that role on Broadway. But I don't know that 17-year-olds are always considering that way.
Yeah. And it's huge. I mean, auditioning is an art in itself, right? And this is such a big piece of that. It's like, what's pre-auditioning?
Yep.
What's your pre-audition process? And it needs to be very clear, physically and mentally.
Yep.
Both.
And I know, we'll dive into that's the psychological side of it, but I really do think that goal of like, how do you bring a full and healthy person into the room? That means vocally, that means hopefully not sick if you can avoid it, though you can always avoid having a cold or something, but doing your best to not be sick and doing your best to be vocally well. And then also, in a healthy enough psychological mental state that you can bring it in. Can we talk? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, you really want to feel good in your skin. Like you just want to feel like you're walking in the room and, I feel great. They can read that, right?
Absolutely.
That's the first thing they see. We talk about that all the time when you come in the door is when the audition starts. And you can see when someone is like, dragging or a little off or whatever.
We know it about people in our life when you go, something's up with you. You don't, it's not like you look bad, but something feels wrong. You just don't feel like you. That energy, when someone says, I made the decision 5 seconds after they walk in the room, it is that energy that we're talking about of what you're bringing in. And you can't just snap your fingers and make that true. Like that is a process that takes some tending to that garden. But let's talk about some of that. So I'd love to talk about, some of the nutritional goals in terms of some of the health stuff that you'd work on with your students that way. And then also stuff like sleep goals, movement, et cetera. So let's go through a little bit of maybe that physical wellness stuff of some of the things that you see teenagers slacking on or not necessarily doing in places where you would help them and guide them in those journeys.
I think a huge one is hydration, especially for performers. Most teenagers are not hydrating nearly enough. Most humans are not, but teenagers are like, I had a bottle of water today. That's good, right? Well, no, you should probably have 6 or 8. And if you're a dancer, more than that. So, and if you drink caffeine, you have to double your hydration then, double your water. So for every cup of coffee.
I got my water with me. I got it just for you. Just for you, Erika. I don't want to get shamed.
He has learned. So yeah, for every cup of coffee, you want 2 cups of water. So, you track it that way. Really, you want to drink your weight in ounces. Ideally, that sounds wild, I know, but if you can even get half of that, I'm happy. And so that's definitely more than 1 bottle of water, but it's particularly important for the vocal cords. We know that, but it really is the gas that fuels your whole system. When we're dehydrated, we're tired, our brain isn't sharp. What's this?
Synapses? Is that what's happening?
There it is. Yeah. Okay. It's not firing.
She was giving synapse hands. Those are hands for those not watching the video. Yeah.
It's not firing as quickly as it would be if you're hydrated. So that to me is like baseline. It's so easy. Just get a water bottle that feels fun to drink out of. That sounds silly, but if your eye is drawn to it, you're more likely to use it. A straw makes it a lot easier. You drink a lot more with a straw than you do otherwise. So just, little tricks, make it fun for yourself. Bedazzle the water bottle if that's what you need to do.
That's the trick. Bedazzle. That'll work on me if I bedazzle the water bottle.
Yes. Yeah. Bedazzle your mason jar there, Charlie.
What else in terms of, so hydration, huge. Totally agree.
Huge. For food, I think a lot of times teenagers don't realize they're just not eating enough because they're so busy, especially if you're dancing or being particularly physically active. It's like you grab, half a bagel in the morning, maybe you have a snack at school, and then you're not eating until dinner after rehearsal. It's just, again, it's a fuel thing. If you can only muster 1 big meal a day, personally, I think it should be lunch then. So, You have a lot of times teenagers aren't hungry when they wake up at 6 a.m. Understood. Grab a little something, get your metabolism revving, and then try to have maybe a big after school pack a lunch and have your big meal then, and then a smaller meal before bed.
Yep.
You don't want to do your huge meal before bed because then you're digesting while you're laying flat. Also not good for your vocal cords, not good for your digestion,
Yep.
all of that. So if you're only fitting in like one major meal a day, I think midday for this age and this purpose is probably a good idea.
Yep. And what if you are someone, I mean, Kara was talking about struggling with some body image stuff. I mean, I know that's so rampant in the dance community, but it's really, I even as I say that, I was saying in the last episode, I'm like, but not just dancers. It's also, it's men, it's actors. It's not just in that world. But if you're somebody who goes, I am struggling with that. If maybe I do want that 6-pack ab, or I do want that, whatever, in terms of, and then I'm struggling with, but I know I need to feel my body in this process. How do you advise students who are in that place?
Yeah. I mean, there's a way to do it. I think deprivation always backfires. We've seen that time and time again. So it's just finding a way to nourish your body that feels safe. That's how you want to start. And for some people, that looks like the only thing that appeals to me for breakfast is Nutella on toast, which from a quote unquote health point of view, maybe that doesn't look ideal. But if that's the only thing that's feeling safe for you in the mornings, eat it. Great. That's your breakfast. So when you have a relationship with food where you're kind of struggling, you want to find the safety. You want to find what feels comforting and not scary, because there's a lot in a relationship like that. A lot of times it comes down to control. So you want to look at that side of things, probably with a therapist.
Yep.
And then when you slowly reintroduce food so that you're not scaring your body, you're teaching your body like, this is okay. We can eat this way and still function and look the way that we want to look. And, high protein, high healthy fats is a great way to do it. So good for your brain health too. And also you kind of retrain yourself over time to not be scared of certain food groups. For us, it was like carbs were just so scary. Right.
Yep.
And now
it was still
learning.
scary, still terrifying, still. It's still difficult. Yeah.
For our parents' generation, it was fats like avocado. They would be horrified to know we love avocado toast, So for every generation, there's something. And so it's kind of just relearning really what happens to your body when you eat that way. Oh, I'm okay. I can eat this full bagel and with butter and it's actually all right. It takes time. It's a process. And part of it's mental and, therapy work and part of it is this work, but it's absolutely possible to redefine your relationship with food to feel nourishing and healthy.
Totally. And I mean, that's something that's been really helpful to me in that world. And we're maybe talk a little bit about movement, was having a relationship with my own physical fitness where it made it easier for me to then be like, okay, this food is fuel. And for dancers, that may be a little easier because you're going, I'm going to go dance for 2 hours. So I know that I need to fuel myself. But for me, I'm like, I just did a hard workout. I'm about to do a workout. I'd like to be able to find that relationship. I'd love to talk about what do you advise in terms of stuff like body movement and then sleep and different, and movement, I guess, is a way of saying working out or different versions of that. I'd love to hear how you talk about that.
For movement, I think it's whatever you actually enjoy that you will stick to. For me, that's a really long walk. I am not a I don't want to be dripping with sweat. That's not my ideal workout. I'm not pounding iron all the time. I love a long walk with a podcast. That feels very good for me.
Maybe it's something podcast. About an hour-long walk. Perfect.
I think that'll be tomorrow's walk. When does this release?
Soon enough.
So that is something I know that I will actually do. So that goes right into my repertoire. It should not be punishment. That's the most important thing. I think for a lot of people think like, oh, I should be like miserable after a workout. That means it's been really effective, or my body should be like absolutely wrecked. No, if that feels good for you, great. If that feels like you've achieved some sort of wonderful thing, great. To each their own, absolutely. But to me, I just don't ever think any sort of workout should feel like a punishment. That is our time. Again, it's nourishing our body. It's giving our brain endorphins. Like there's so much good stuff that comes out of just movement. So it's finding the movement that feels good.
And then what about sleep? I know is a huge thing for teenagers, something they really struggle with.
It's huge, and it's hard because of the phones, because of schedules, stimulation. It's really hard to wind down at the end of the night. I mean, the biggest thing is when we see that phone light, our body registers it as the sun. So it says like, hey, we're staying awake. So trying to get away from light, that screen light, as early as you can in the night is going to be really effective.
Yep.
Is that possible for everyone? Not usually, especially if you're doing homework after rehearsal or after a really long day. But the sooner that you can shut those lights down, those screen lights, the better it's going to be for your REM cycle. If you're a person that gets up in the middle of the night, it's like having those, what are my kind of anti-anxiety hacks to kind of get my brain to quiet back down again. A great one is to try to squeeze every muscle from your toe to your neck, like literally one toe. Okay, squeeze it and hold it for 5 seconds. And then I'm going to squeeze the muscle on the left side of my foot for 5 seconds. And then I'm going to go to my calf for 5 seconds. And you work your way up your body, squeezing and releasing every muscle for 5 seconds. And then hopefully by the time you work your way up, your brain has sort of focused on something else, and it's that kind of stuff to really, and that's for people try to silence
whose mind is racing in the middle of the night, which, like, I can't sleep because I'm thinking about this tomorrow. I'm thinking about whatever.
And actually, one of the worst things you can do is, I have to get a good night's sleep because I have to be up in 2 hours.
Now it's only 3 hours to the airport. Now it's 2 hours. Now I might as well not go to sleep at all. I'm going to sleep in if I do that. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why we almost never sleep well the night before a flight. But it's hard. It's hard. But sleep, I've said this so many times to you. Everyone says, is it food or exercise? It's sleep. That's the most important pillar of this particular age, especially.
It's so true. And us hypocrites talking about this as young parents, though you probably are still sleeping 10 hours a night as a parent. I don't know. No. It couldn't be true.
No. The baby wakes.
We've been through a real sleep regression that we are finally, I think, around the other side of. But Solveig slowly was sleeping in our bed an hour a night, then 2 hours, and then it was 5 hours. And I was like, we have to. I was
foot in the face.
Foot in the face, kicking, screaming, just too much. Not screaming, but hard for sleep. REM cycles. I don't know about REM cycles.
Yeah, forget it.
I do think it's worth saying, some of this stuff I think is worth, and we have plenty of juniors and people who be listening to this not in the middle of unifieds, but I do think it's worth saying, and this was some of what I would think about with stuff like food and water too, is that, like, it's probably not time if you're between New York City and Chicago as you listen to this, or you're just in Chicago to be like, I need a whole new wellness routine for my auditions, right? Sometimes people are like, oh, now I got to eat super healthy and do a totally different, like that. Like, if you're the kind of person who, does drink coffee, it's not like time to be like, I'm quitting coffee and I'm never going to do that. Like, there are things where it's like, or a brand new workout routine that's completely new to you. It's like, that's not necessarily healthy for your body if you're about to start, do dance stuff. So it's worth saying that some of this routine also, it's about the longer term stuff. When you talk about this stuff, we'll talk about some of the psychological stuff you can do now. But some of this stuff, when you're creating your own prep process, it is about something that's familiar to you in routine, as opposed to like totally novel, I think, in this stuff.
Yeah, and also something that is not going to, for some people, a really long physical warm-up is effective. For some people, that gets them more in their head. So as you're auditioning, as you're going through college, you're learning so much still. You have all this time to just learn and experiment. You have to try to find the sweet spot of like that. It's 15 minutes for me. That's all I need. Any more than that, I'm starting to get in my head. And that's important too.
I always say this at the mocks when I'm talking about creating your prep plan. What is your plan of how you prepare yourself to do your work? But there's really no way to learn what you need for you, except by going through this process. So I'm like, pay attention to this process, because a lot of you are now at your 10th audition and you've maybe tried a couple different things, and note for yourself, what is the thing that helped me prep and feel loose in the room, and what made me feel tight? Like, it's not going to be the same for everybody. And it's really hard to know that until you've gone through high pressure audition situations and known, oh, that actually does make me feel really good. This meal, this much time awake, this much, all that kind of stuff. Different people are different. There are things that work generally for a lot of people, but then, some people really do like push-ups in the hallway. Some people like meditating. Like, it can be completely different in terms of what you're actually doing right before you walk in the room.
Oh yeah. And I always, the LA to Chicago weather change is big too. It's like, you got to come prepared for, you need your little steamer, you need your hot tea, like that's a different thing too.
It's so true. We often talk about, because we experience it every year. We go to New York, we're sitting in the green room. We go to Chicago, we sit in the green room, and then we go to LA, and we're like outside in the sun in the green room. And it's like the vibes are totally different at those three cities. They're all totally, and different people really thrive in different environments. Some people say, oh, New York is so hectic. New York is overwhelming. I'm like, that is definitely true for some people. Some people love that vibe. Some people are like, I'm on it. Next audition. I'm hustling. I got my competitive urges. Where for them, LA would almost feel like, this is too sanguine. This is too, I'm not up. I want to have my great audition. And then other people are like, thank God for the sun. Thank God. Oh, this is just easy. I can walk in. I feel good about it. There's space. Everyone's different that way.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people
And
love
that's
Chicago because it feels like a little party, but some people that not. That's like too insular and too weird. It's like, this is weird. We're all in this
we're
hotel.
too cold.
It's too freezing cold. Yeah,
It's
for sure.
freezing.
I do want to talk a little bit about anxiety as well. I know that's, you mentioned the sort of sleep anxiety. I do think that is one of the ways our student body has changed in the 20 years I've been doing this, is the rampant increase in diagnosed anxiety. And I
Oh
know it's a
yeah.
kind of complicated question of like, are we diagnosing it more? Are the students actually that much more anxious? Is awareness of it making them more anxious? All those things, right? But like, if I am generally a student or a parent of a student who is really struggling with anxiety and overwhelm and burnout, and that they're in that place where mentally they're really struggling to sort of adapt to this process, is there anything that you sort of suggest when you work with students?
Yeah, I think a big one is kind of silencing the noise and whatever that means for you. So if social media is not being helpful, then especially for the week of Unifies or maybe just even the weekend that you're there, get rid of it. Anything that's adding anxious noise to your brain needs to go in those really crucial moments, those 48 hours. You can live without Snapchat for 48 hours. And in fact, it will serve you so beautifully to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get right back on it Sunday night, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll catch back up. But any sort of noise like that, it affects us all way more than we realize. And for
Yep.
teens especially, Unifieds requires so much concentration. And if there's something going on at home socially and you're seeing it happening on social media and it's distracting you from that's such a common example that
Yep.
happens a lot. If you had not had your phone, social media activated and you didn't know about that, your auditions could have maybe gone a lot better because your brain would have been
Yep.
totally in the audition.
Yep.
So it sounds easy. I know it's awful to try to do the social media purge, but it really helps. And that's for parents too.
Yep.
Sometimes the parents groups, which are so supportive, everyone is very well intentioned. Everyone means so well and wants to be helpful. But sometimes for the parents too, they're like, oh my gosh, I read this and I heard that. And we don't want the students,
Yes.
absorbing your anxiety as a parent. So if you're starting to feel like that noise is affecting you, remove yourself from it. It's
Yep.
better for you, and it is definitely better for your child. Absolutely.
It's so well said. And, it does feel like anxiety in a lot of ways feels like it is the opposite of like presentness. Not that presentness always means you have to be calm, but anxiety often is, if you are worrying about the future or sometimes worrying about the past, but it is like a state of not being in this moment. And I think parents often are contributing to that of going, what does this mean? But if this happened, then what does that mean? And it's like, great, but your child is auditioning in 10 minutes. Like, they need to be
Right.
right now in this audition, not worrying about the previous audition, not worrying about how they're going to get to the next audition. Some of
Yeah.
that anxiety, I think, which that's a little different than just the diagnosed anxiety, but just the spinning of the stress of it all. I
Yeah.
do feel like is opposite of presentness.
I think it's good for parents too to ask their child, like, what do you need from me this weekend?
Yeah.
What would be your ideal way for me to behave in the green room?
Yep.
Do you want me to completely leave you alone? Do you want me checking in with you as soon as I see you walk in the door? Like, ask your kid what they need from you
Totally.
or what their ideal version of you emotionally would be throughout the weekend. I just had one of my students this past week. We decided she's going to have a little signal with her parent, where if she's feeling overwhelmed by some of the chatter, she's going to like give a little ear tug or whatever it
Yep.
is they come up with, and her parent is going to come over and remove her from that conversation.
Yep.
That right there, great. That's going
So
to
smart.
save her 50% of her sort of mental anguish. And that's an easy thing to do. So have that conversation with your child, because you can really be solid for them. And a lot of times they just need like safe and solid
Yep.
throughout this sort of unpredictability.
It's so well said. Yeah. I love that. And, we'll talk a little bit more about social media and on the second half, but, not only do I always say you're free to remove yourself from our social media if we're causing that, I'll also just add in that about our green rooms that like, we of course encourage
Mhm.
you to be here. We think they're really warm, wonderful. We're all having fun. But if you're the
Yeah.
kind of student who goes, hey, I'm not the person who wants to hang out with 20 other kids. I need a little bit of space to myself. Please, we encourage you to do that. Like, we
Yeah.
provide that if you want that, and we'll say, come stop by, say hello, but don't listen to us if that's not you. If you're like, I'm not the person. Sometimes people will text us and they go, I didn't stop by and say hello. We so appreciate you being there. I didn't want 20 other kids surrounding me. I needed to be alone in my process. I totally respect that if that's you, but feel free.
And everybody has a totally different energy, and all of the green room, the social media stuff, it's all there to bolster bolster, bolster, bolster. But for someone who's maybe a little more introverted, something like the green room can be really scary.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, stay in your hotel room, stay in the hall, and then stop in Sunday when your auditions are done. Check in then, say your highs if that sounds fun,
Totally.
But everybody's different, and there's just no reason to put yourself in a situation that's going to add any angst.
Yep. I'm speaking to like our juniors and sophomores and freshmen, and we even have some middle school listeners too. What about just that student in terms of they're struggling with I guess anxiety is what I'm saying, but really just being overscheduled, right? It's like, what about that student who, I think often you'll be working with a student, they'll go, it's hard for me to find 15 minutes to take a break, because it's just they're doing the choir and they're doing the soccer and they're doing the play and all those things. How do you help students and families in terms of if they are that student who's just overscheduled?
Mm-hmm. Well, we look at what's non-negotiable, which usually is school. And then we look at what is the most fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And then in category C, whatever's left, can any of that stuff go away?
Mm-hmm.
So the non-negotiables we have to keep in the schedule. So that goes down first. And then what is most fulfilling to you? For a lot of these students, that's doing the show or being in choir. Okay, so then do you have to be in the photography club? Do you have to volunteer to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's yes, I do. And then I'll push you. Well, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Tell me why. And then really they don't. And that's an easy thing to kind of take off the schedule.
Yep.
And this falls into a bigger conversation, which is burnout, which is like a huge thing. And it's avoidable by taking out those activities, or those responsibilities that you don't necessarily have to have there.
Yep.
You need downtime. Every human on this earth needs downtime, especially teenagers. You have to have downtime. So in these moments of life where we're overscheduled, and sometimes it's unavoidable, absolutely. But wherever we can find those little pockets of 1 hour here and there to take a bath and watch a movie, you got to do it. That rest is so, so, so important. To me, mandatory.
Yep. I love that. And I really love the do you of it all. Like, that's something I think that 17-year-olds, it's hard because you feel the difference between what is a responsibility, what is a non-negotiable, and what is something you're like, it feels social and I love, my friend wants me to do it and I don't want to disappoint my friend. But I don't think you realize at 17, what you realize as you get older, I'm like, that friend is going to be fine. They're actually not, you're not ruining their life. And there is somebody else who can replace you as the treasurer of the blah, blah. It's like whatever that thing is, you feel like, oh, I don't want to let people down. I want to succeed at everything. And it sort of all gets the same wash of like, I'm either being good or I'm being bad. And if I let it go, I'm being bad. And it's like at 17, you go, it's actually, you don't need to do all of it necessarily.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things to ask the students like that struggle with that kind of thing is like, well, so why does the feelings of Jenna, who's the vice president of the horseback riding club, why are her feelings more important right now than yours?
Yep.
And that starts teaching them self-advocacy and, you know, some bigger themes that are important, but it's a good time to start learning how to do that.
As my therapist always says, where's Charlie in that? Where's Charlie in that?
That's exactly
where's Charlie?
right. I love that.
Yeah. It's an equestrian club, okay? It's not a horseback riding club. This is a very fancy club we have at our school. It's all equestrian. No, but that leads me perfectly. We had a therapist on the show, our dear friend, Carrie Anderson, who talked a little bit about wellness in general or mental health. How would someone know if there's someone who goes, hey, some of this stuff speaks to me. This is stuff that I think I want to help attend to. I maybe I'm struggling with some of the things we mentioned. How would they know whether they should talk to someone like you versus talking to, let's say, a medical professional? And I don't know which the ones who can prescribe. It's a psychiatrist, a psychologist,
psychiatrist.
Yeah. But do I go, am I someone who needs that? Do I need a combination of that? Is that something you help guide them with? So how do I navigate those different relationships?
Yeah, it's usually a combination. So in a very, very simple way, and this isn't always true, but it usually is. To me, therapy, which is usually CBT therapy, can help you sort of process things that have happened in the past. And DBT and sort of some of this more anxiety work is helping arm you with tools on how to manage the present and the future. So a lot of times that therapy work will inform this kind of work of how are we moving forward. So oftentimes you do need both. I certainly have students that aren't in therapy and we're just working on, how to manage basically. DBT, it's a lot of mindfulness, which I know is another buzzword, but by mindfulness, it's how can I regulate my emotions? How can I not go from 1 to 10? How can I stay present in this? If I am overwhelmed, how do I make a schedule? How, all of those sort of mindfulness ideas. Where what I don't do is, this happened to me when I was 4 and it
Right.
was really traumatic to me. Can you help me with that?
Yep.
No, I cannot. That's for your therapist.
Yep. It's so well said. And I love Ali Louis Borgi, who was on the pod maybe a year ago, was talking about yoga. He was like, oh man, I really get like why we do yoga as actors now. Like at first I was like, it's weird. Why actors are, but like there's something about it that is so, for my show, it's so good. I'm like, yeah, there's some of these concepts aren't just so that you can show up healthily as a human being, though that's important too. But some of these concepts I do think integrate really well with like mindfulness as a human being, great. Mindfulness as an actor is like essential. Like the idea of being able to be
Absolutely.
present in your auditions, present on stage, like those are things that we need more. I mean, everyone could use some mindfulness, of course, but I think we need it more than the average person because in order to be an actor, you have to have an element of mindfulness or an element of this.
I feel like my entire Carnegie Mellon 4 years was, Erika, how can you be more in your body, right? That's what every professor was constantly on me about.
Yep.
And I don't think I really understood it until I connected mind and body through this kind of work. And I really did become a better actor when I figured that out.
For sure.
For sure.
I mean, the 8 a.m. yoga before 9 a.m. acting, I'm like, it makes sense. It makes sense. Sometimes I was half asleep in that yoga, but like you really put you
at
into
the time, but really necessary.
All right, let's take a short break. And in the back end, we're going to dive a little bit more into this mind body, or especially mind connection. So we're back in a flash. Okay, we're back with the wonderful Erika Strasburg, young mother, wellness coach extraordinaire. I want to dive deep into that, why I wanted to have you on now, as this releases next Wednesday. So it's going to release in the middle of Chicago Unified and really speak to the mindset of students at this time of year. So, knowing, of course, the challenge that we give them at MTCA, which is that it is your job to walk into these auditions believing in yourself, believing you have something valuable to share, and that you are searching for a college that agrees with that belief. And it's a lot easier said than done. I know that challenge. Can we just speak toward that subset of people maybe who right now are struggling with that belief a little bit? So for some of our students, they're riding high off an early acceptance. They've received some positive feedback, or, maybe they haven't, but they just don't struggle with that self-belief. I never struggle with that self-belief, unbelievably. But I know many, it is really a struggle. I mean, this process is just so vulnerable in general, not just the nature of potentially getting rejection, but just in the process of what it is to reveal yourself in a room asking for judgment. It's a really hard skill to be able to kind of hold yourself tenderly enough to be vulnerable artistically, and yet with enough persistence and tenacity and thick-skinnedness to be able to accept the rejection as part of the process. Okay, so that's a long ramble, but can we try to speak to that student? Imagine I came to you and I said, all my friends are getting into school and I have nothing but rejection so far. I have 10 more auditions, but I know I'm not going to get in any of those schools. Like, what would you say to me if I came to you like that?
I would say, first of all, fresh page, right? The 10 that have already happened, we're leaving them. This is a fresh page. You could have very well gotten into a few of those 10, maybe not. Fine, doesn't matter. Here and now, here we go. Blinders on, first and foremost. And that blinders include the noise. So silence that noise, which we already talked about. Blinders on, new page. Okay. And it's this idea of like, how do you zhuzh yourself? I don't really know what other word to use, but it's like, you got to find your zhuzh, right? And all it takes is one person behind that table to see your own little sparkle, which, Charlie, your sparkle is way different than my sparkle, way different than Katie's. And we ended up all in the same place, but we're wildly different performers and people. But all it took was Barbara, one person saying, oh, that's great. That belongs here. And I just said to someone yesterday, I auditioned at, 5 or 6 schools, which, back in the day was enough.
This was 40 years ago that you were doing it.
45 years ago. And I got into Carnegie last March 17th. My big package came in the mail with a scholarship, but then also I didn't get into some schools that would be considered like lesser than. So it was no from sort of a middle school, no from a middle school, no from a middle of the road school. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to be Kristen Chenoweth. Great. And then there it came. Right? And
despite the fact that Kristen Chenoweth did not go to Carnegie Mellon. I love it.
And there it was. And it was one yes. Carnegie was absolutely the right place for me. changed my life. My
Yep.
soulmates I found there, you know,
Yep.
in my friendships, like all of that. It was absolutely right. And I remember that audition. It was in New York. I was late. I was 90 minutes late. I thought,
Yep.
well, I'm not getting in here, but I'm just going to go in and I'm going to sparkle. I'm just going to
Uh-huh.
do my thing. And it worked. They asked me for a third monologue, didn't have one, made one up.
No, you didn't. You
Yes,
made up
made
a
it up.
monologue, Erika.
Tony McKay made it up.
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
If I had MTCA, I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, you would have come in with a third monologue. You would have been 90 minutes late too.
Prepared.
But I wonder, that's so cool. I love that story. And, you know, I wonder if there is something about some unlock that you found for yourself, especially somebody who I'm imagining, knowing or guessing 18-year-old Erika was relatively type A, relatively controlling, relatively like on top of things. Like,
What do you mean?
wonder, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I wonder if there was something in the being late. Well, I already didn't get in here. That let you
1,000%.
release, that let you.
1,000%. I really think that was it. And it's like what I said about sometimes that long warm up doesn't serve you. NYU, Syracuse, I was early. I got the hotel, you know, I was like so prepared.
Yep.
Up with my oatmeal and my tea. And with Carnegie, I just was like running out of a cab,
Yep.
flying into the elevator, like, okay, I'm here. Sorry, I'm late. Is this okay?
Yep.
And I do think that freed me big time. I am not endorsing
We're not suggesting
being
90 minutes late.
That is not what I'm endorsing.
But we
there
are suggesting,
was something mentally. There was some freedom in that experience for sure.
And that there is an active process, which most 18-year-olds are not great at how to prep themselves. I mean, I think the oatmeal was probably smart. I think a lot of things you were doing, maybe vocally, you know how to warm yourself up and are doing okay. I think it's often the area where our students are strongest as they have some vocal warm up. Maybe it's been, they've been guided in. But that the process of getting to where you got to mentally, where you said, let me leap off this cliff. Can you do that when you're sitting in the room for 30 minutes waiting for your audition to start? That is such a tough goal, but I want to implant that in all of your heads that is the goal where you go, screw it, let's do this thing, you know?
Yeah.
How do you get to that place?
I remember in the dance call for Syracuse being on the floor stretching with like, you know, girls who looked just like me all around me in full split and I could not touch my toes. And I just was right there, psyched out, right there. I psyched myself out. It was a horrible audition.
Yep.
And the juxtaposition between that and the Carnegie sort of like flying off experience was just wild.
Yep.
But all to say, I just really think that there is something to tapping into like, what is my magic? My magic came out that day because it had to, right? I flew out of that cab and I was like, Erika, you have 3 minutes to do your thing. You have nothing to lose at this point.
Yep. It's
it
so
worked
interesting.
out.
And I had a very similar experience with my audition, which is still an unbelievably good audition for 18-year-old Charlie to have done for Carnegie Mellon. Of course, I was not late. Shockingly, I was a very late person, but I was not late. I was sitting there. I had an hour to prepare for it. But I just remember sort of feeling like, and I really felt like, you know, some people talk about like creative muses and how sort of stuff comes to you. Like I felt like I was touched by, you know, some spirit, some wonderful spirit who just kind of told me, you're going to get in. Like, and I was just so convinced. I was like, I did not think this whole time, oh God, I'm going to get into this program. But I just had that feeling all of a sudden where I went, I'm going to get in. And so like I had that little The Secret moment happen to me. I'd never heard of The Secret, but where I'm like, oh, I need to just now go and make true what is already true. Like I'd already I visualized myself walking in the room and I was like, I'm already going to get into this school. Like I know how my monologues are going to go. I prepared. These are great monologues. They were great monologues. I felt really good about it. And I was just like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get in. And I felt like it had already happened. So then as I walk into the room, I felt like I'm like, oh, cool. I'm living out the specifics of how I'm going to get in. But I left that room being like, I'm going to get, like I entered the room thinking that. I left the room thinking that. That is a confidence that I wish I could carry and bottle up for my whole life, because I have many times in my life not had that confidence. It felt like something that happened to me as opposed to something that I was doing. But I've often thought, what did I do to enable that to happen? What did I do to set myself up for that muse to be able to visit me and say, you've got this?
And so many actors always say too, their best performances they don't remember. It's like you're so you're so deep in some other realm that your piece ends and you're like, oh, don't remember how that went, but it was fantastic.
It's so true.
But you kind of black out because you're in this other dimension. All to say, all of that, if that's a little too floopy for you to tap into, if you aren't comfortable manifesting, oh, I'm getting in here, if that seems too bold for you, what you can say to yourself is, I am so good at this material.
Yes.
I am so good at this 32 bar cut.
Yep.
And it's been perfect in my bedroom. It was perfect last week. Like, I'm going to nail this. Like,
Yep.
you can say that in full truth,
Yep.
because every single, especially MTCA student, has worked their tails off
Yep.
to get to that point. So
Well, not every
you
single one. I can think of 3 of you that could have worked harder. I'm going to say those names right now. No, I'm just kidding.
But you can absolutely be that bold.
Yep.
You can own that for sure.
And I love you're giving those different examples. I mean, I do think the same way different kinds of prep works differently for different people. Different kind of self-talk absolutely is going to affect different people differently. But I think some of what we're speaking to is the awareness of that self-talk. So I don't think if you don't do that, if you don't put some awareness on it, I don't think you all realize some of the ways in which you do talk to yourselves. Otherwise, it's like, don't mess up. Like often if you don't say that, like when I'll see students like running their monologues in the room, like frantically, I'm like, what you're really telling yourself as you soothe is like, please don't forget part of this monologue. Please don't crack on the high note. And if you're thinking about not cracking on the high note, like that self-talk is negative. Not only is it controlling, so instead of finding the release, it's like gripping it so tightly so something doesn't go wrong, but it's also like trying to avoid a negative. It's trying not to think about an elephant as opposed to going, what am I thinking about? What am I doing actively?
Yeah, and we learned that, right? We spent 4 years of college learning how to let go of the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's nothing more freeing than when you feel like you've actually done that as a performer. It's the best.
Yep.
But there's also, I say this to my students, like, you are auditioning to learn. They are looking for potential, not perfection. So rather than, oh, is my voice going to crack? The reminder to yourself should just be potential, not perfection.
Yes.
Auditioning to learn. If I crack, they have 4 years to teach me how to not crack.
The number of times we have stories of students who cracked and got into that school. People don't believe it, but I promise you can crack in an audition and get into the school and book the job.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're cracking on Broadway. Everybody's cracking.
Everybody's
but
cracking.
They're gonna teach you in school, like, how to handle that. If you're having an off vocal day or particularly ambitious cut, like, that's what you're going to school for. It's okay if it's not 100% there that day. What is 100% there that day is your magic and your zhuzh. That's what you can show 10 out of 10 times, no matter what. Hoarse, tired, it doesn't matter. Show them your zhuzh.
Yep. And not only, I mean, of course, we don't want you to walk into an audition hoarse. It's not that you necessarily want to make a mistake. We don't, but like we often talk about, the mistakes often are the best part of the audition. Because in some ways it shows if you crack, if you forget a line, if something goes wrong, especially when you're talking about to a prepared audition. This is not somebody who just memorized their monologue yesterday, right? But when you walk into the prepared audition and you do have those moments of where we see a fissure in your work, it often shows, hey, this person was holding this gently enough that there was the possibility of that, right? As opposed to make yourself not crack often means I'm singing it exactly how I planned it and nothing is going to change. And finding those little moments of magic that often happen, the cracks acting wise, the things that go a little bit surprising, it's not necessarily cracking the middle of your high note, but in a monologue, those moments can be so exciting when you go, I genuinely surprised myself in the room. Something happened that was different. We feel that. So that feels alive and crackling in the room.
Yeah.
I have to go back and make you, because you mentioned your own floopiness, which I want to make sure, I was going to call you out on it. For those of you who don't use zhuzh your sparkle and know automatically what that means, what do you mean by, like, how does one, and maybe especially coming back a little bit to that person who's going, my sparkle, my fire feels a little diminished. What are you doing to zhuzh your sparkle? What are you doing to sort of turn up the heat, the flame of that magic that you go, I'm talking about as self-belief, but whatever it is that walks in the room and goes, yes, I have something to share. I'm not sure that I would know at 17 what that means in terms of how do I improve that?
I mean,
how do I feed that?
It can be as simple as a mantra in the mirror before, of just like, you've got this, you're fierce, whatever feels genuine to you. Don't make a mantra that feels corny or, like a stretch. Find something that really speaks to you. Say it to yourself 5 times in the mirror in true earnest. And that works. I promise you that works. Whether it's 10% or 90%, it's doing something. Okay. So that's one good thing for especially for the gals. Sometimes they feel like they need to put on this excitement and everything gets up here, right? And you talk up here because you're just so excited. Oh, I'm great, thanks. How are you? It's a very common thing, especially in our gals, and they really try to work that out of you in college. But if you can show them that you are grounded, you don't need to click up into that register, and I'm guilty of this all the time, but all you do is you scrunch your toes in your shoes. So if they're asking you a question, oh, Erika, I see here you played soccer. Tell us about that. Instead of going, oh yeah, I loved soccer. My dad was a coach. And that's not connected to me. That
Mm-hmm.
sort of sounds wild. I scrunch my toes and to remind myself how grounded I am into the floor. And suddenly my voice drops back into my
Mm-hmm.
center. Sometimes before you go in the room, it's about pounding your abs, right? We learned a lot of that stuff in school, but pounding your abs to you want to stay connected to yourself. All you can show them is you in this room. That
Mm-hmm.
is your gift. That is your gift. Let's just say everyone's very talented. Most people are, but not everyone is you. And I know that sounds corny, but it is absolutely true. So staying connected to your voice is a huge thing.
Yep.
And you can trick yourself if you're feeling really insecure, but you are connected to your voice, you're not going to sound insecure.
Yep.
You're not going to sound nervous.
Yep.
So whatever it takes to kind of bring yourself back down into your center. Sometimes I just like poke and rub my abs, like my stomach. Sometimes I do the foot thing. Sometimes I pound my thighs, like to really drop in.
Yep.
So that I'm not talking up here and this is not me, but I'm so guilty of that. I've done that 1,000 times. It's just nerves.
Yep.
But that's one thing where like, just go in connected to yourself, to your essence, and let them see that. And you can trick yourself out of your own nerves by doing that as well.
It's so smart. And, we talk about all the different ways you're both discovering yourself and then trying to reveal yourself. And it is, you do often have to fight against, it is our natural instinct to show them a representative of us. And, there's no 100%. This is all a spectrum. You're not going to be like, I'm 100% me in every way. It's not that,
Totally.
but it is about, hey, am I showing up with a mask this is how I think they want me to appear. And so I'm going to be really bubbly in your case, or I'm going to be whatever that thing is. But that is preventing us to go, but I want to meet Erika. That's not to say like it's not like low voiced is better. So it's not like if I walked in and went, hi, I'm Charlie.
Yeah.
It's so nice to meet you here. That's like, well, that's also a different kind of mask. It's not as common of a mask because as we are more energized, it's easier to be up as opposed to be dropped in really low. But that also would be a false manifestation of me, right? It's like, how do I connect to as much what I'm actually like in real life? And I think it is because it feels vulnerable that our defense mechanism wants to shut that down. We would much rather be rejected showing them what we think they wanted to see than to be rejected as, this is actually Charlie. If you don't like this person, you don't like Charlie on a Tuesday.
Right.
Like, that's what I'm actually
and
like.
And it's hard to pare that back. But I think another good thing you can do is before you walk in the room or while you're waiting in the holding room, just remind yourself of your 3 favorite things about yourself, just in your head, or write them down or have them in your book if that's helpful to revisit. Your 3 most favorite things about yourself. Just keep playing that in your head. I am awesome at this. I'm such a great friend, or whatever it is. And that's going to start to like get that magic and that zhuzh to kind of boil. When we're feeling ourselves, other people can feel that. So it's the hack is how do you feel yourself before you walk in the room? Well, remind yourself why you're freaking awesome.
I love that. That's the fuel of the fire, or whatever that sparkle is. Like, there's some core tenets of self-belief of, I know this is great about me. Yeah. I do think, I mean, and I want to be careful because, of course, people who know me and have listened to this podcast will have heard me joke. And I am one of those people, unlike basically all of you, who might need to be careful that I don't come off as cocky. And I'm often joking and being self-deprecating because there is the fear that if I walked in, like, I don't think those auditors would have gotten from me, oh, this person thinks he already got in, even though I'm like, I feel like I already got in when I walked in the room, right? I didn't walk in with a cocky swagger. I did walk in with the swagger of like, I belong in this room. I have something to share that is that, and I think that was more people in my generation, I've talked about this, have that like, had more of a cockiness. That was more of an issue than I think most students today, where they come in normally not with that self-belief, or not enough of that self-belief. And I do think I'm saying that I think there would be some people who would not want to read, here are the 3 great things about myself, for fear that they would come off cocky. And I guess I would say to them, I don't think you will. And also, it's not the end of the world if you come off confident. That like,
But
yeah.
Also, cockiness is another mask, Charlie.
Right.
I mean, that's a separate podcast.
No, it's a mask I wear often comedically, sometimes not comedically. Sometimes I'm accidentally wearing it, but often I wear that comedically. But it is a mask, of course. Yeah.
It's another mask. And so what we're trying to do is get you to take away any of the mask, whether it's I'm this like super bubbly, positive girl, or I'm this overconfident, like strapping man. those are all masks, right? And again, what is acting? Well, we're asking you to pare everything away, be incredibly vulnerable, share your heart and soul. Okay, well, we need to get rid of the masks then. And again, you learn how to do that in college.
Yep.
But that's also magic. If they can see you in the room without any of that on, that allows them to come in. That is that magic that we're talking about. So whether it's building yourself up or whatever works for Charlie, it's how to get yourself to have that moment of like, I deserve to be here.
Yep.
This is why I'm fierce.
Yes.
And please enjoy my material.
Yes. And there is really a natural humility to true confidence. If you can really walk in and go, this is what I have to share, and I hope you like it. There's a natural humility that there's a different version of it when it's a little more insecure, where it'll tip into cockiness because it'll be like, you'd be a fool not to take me, right? That's a different feeling to be like, you're an idiot if you don't think this is great, right? No one feels, but that's very different than going, I really think I have something to share for the right college. I hope you're that college. I hope that you appreciate the things that I think are special about me, but of course it's just me that thinks they're special. It might not be your taste. That takes real confidence to be able to offer that up without forcing it and saying, you need this. But that is a true confidence. It's much more confident than the person who walks in like, you dummies would be lucky to have me. I'm like, but that's an insecurity to that energy.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to make sure we do talk a little bit about social media as well. I know we've talked some of it. Just can we talk about social media diet? We've talked about with artists before, how some of them, in terms of how they use it for themselves professionally, again, not necessarily that you have to use it professionally, but a lot of them do, but they try not to be consumed by it as users. We haven't spoken about that just in general. You mentioned like, do you go get off for that weekend? But just in general with 17, 18-year-olds, what do you recommend to students in terms of their social media use?
Yeah. You have to be really honest with yourself about what's working for you. I mean, this is true for any age, but especially for teenagers, because there is that social pressure to be on, to be involved in it. If you're not on Snapchat, you're missing out on this party and you're not seeing who's here, when. If you're not on there's all of that. So there is this added pressure in the teenage years of like, you should be there. And you have to just be really honest with yourself about what's working, and then have the strength to say, okay, I can handle this, and I can handle being involved and hearing the noise and posting, and I love to share. But a lot of people can't. A lot of people can't. And that is so fine. And especially, I mean, your brain is still developing at that age. A lot's happening in those years. You want to protect yourself as much as you can from any of it. High school in its little incubator is hard enough, right? The extension of high school on social media makes it that much harder. So you have to just kind of know when and how to save yourself. And again, it's easier said than done, but you can start small. So you can say, a lot of kids right now are averaging 12 hours a day on their phone. Okay, maybe right now my goal is to get down to 8. Start there and then go down to 6, and hopefully then you're down to 1. That would be ideal, but you can pare it back. There's obviously apps and all of that stuff that can help you do that if you need help paring back, but we have the data now. It is such a huge part of mental health for any age, but particularly for teenagers when you're already going through and so much and you're juggling so much. So you have to know when it's time to step back. If you're going on and you're feeling anxious, if you're going on and it's making you sad, if you're constantly comparing yourself to the people around you, why am I not invited to that? Why don't I look like that? Why can't I do that? If those questions are floating through your brains on a day-to-day, it's time to go. It's time to go. It's just not something you need to be exposed to. And that's not forever. You can come back to it.
I love that. And I think it's worth saying, we talk about social media. I think people probably know, when I'm scrolling mindlessly through TikTok, that's not the best thing. But it's also, we're talking about broader social media. We're talking about, certainly I mentioned already, like our own internal Facebook groups, which I talked about it last episode as a takeaway of like, of course, those are there for you to celebrate each other. And it's so beautiful when you guys are able to celebrate each other and say, I'm so happy that you got into this school. You also don't have to be a hero. If you're in the place where you go, right now, on January 30th, I'm not in that place where I'm genuinely happy for everyone else because I don't have something yet, that you go, that's not your job to be a hero right now. Your job is to go audition. So if you're going, I actually want to remove myself and I'll be back in March and then I will be a champion and that'll be a good learning lesson for me. I'm like, you being like, look how much I can take and it doesn't bother me. That's not really what the goal is, right? That's not your job right now. Your job
Yeah,
is to
and
go
let
walk
me
in there,
just
be an
say,
actor.
I do that as an adult too.
Totally.
Like, if I know I've lost a role, I'm not necessarily congratulating that person within 24 hours. Like, I need a day or two,
Yep.
So that's okay. You
Right.
just take it.
It's a
Take it.
maturity to know your limits, to know what, like, where am I actually? Like, I kind of wish I booked that, but
Yeah.
I want to make sure that that's broader. So I mean, that's still Facebook there, but I'm also talking about, yes, Snapchat, but also whether it's a WhatsApp group, whether it's a text chain. I feel like I hear more and more about students who are really struggling. It's actually not literally social media; it's their, like, theater group text chain, or sometimes it's an MTCA text chain where you met at the summer masterclass, but there's 40 people on it, or whatever it is. In given years, it'll be different in terms of how different people are consuming their information. But, like,
Hmm.
to me, that's all part of the same diet of going, that might be a thread you need to remove yourself from. There's
Totally.
nothing wrong with
And
going, I don't like hearing that right now, right before my audition.
Totally. And I think if you're not feeling confident enough to do it on your own, blame a parent, blame a
Yes.
teacher. I got caught. I'm not allowed to be here anymore. My mom says only 5 minutes a day on my
Uh,
phone, so I'm gonna just mute this chat. Whatever. Just
Great
make it
time to
up.
blame mom. My mom is making me remove the. She thinks it's not healthy for me. I'll be back in a month or whatever. Like, great, of course,
Yeah.
blame it on your mom. Blame it
Yeah.
on MTCA. You
Do
can say Charlie Murphy told me to do it, and he made you take it. Come
absolutely.
on, yeah, if you need to.
In fact, blame it on Charlie.
Yeah,
Let's just
that's
say
much
that.
better than
Yeah.
mom. Mom
Yeah.
takes enough
Yeah.
blame already.
Mom
Blame it
has enough.
on me.
Yeah.
Um,
But absolutely, those again, it's all well intended. Those text chains, everyone's trying to build each other up and stay in the know.
yep.
Not helpful if you're not feeling 10 out of 10.
And I've
Not
heard
helpful.
you talk in the past about kind of community before, and potentially seeking out what is a version of community that is positive and helpful. Like, is there something that you would be directly consciously focusing on if you go, all right, I'm removing this connection, but I know I need some connection in terms of my life?
Yeah, again, it's your people. It's finding those warm pockets of your life. And for right now, if that's just a parent, that's
Hmm.
fine. If no one else feels safe to talk about auditions with or discuss, email one of your coaches first of
Yep.
all. That's always a
Yep.
safe place. But if while you're at Unifieds or in the thick of things, if mom is the only person it's feeling safe to really be honest with, then just stick with mom.
Yep.
Keep it nice with everybody else. Hey, good to see you. Break a leg, and that's all it needs to be. Again, you're not at Unified to make lifelong friends. Some
Yep.
MTCA people will be your lifelong friends. Absolutely.
Yep.
But that's not the point of the weekend. So you got to just kind of stay focused on that. The social stuff goes to the back burner.
Yep.
And just to go back to your point, socially, it's about finding those warm pockets. And I
Yep.
know for some people, there is one particular MTCA student. It's like, if Erika, if I'm sitting there and I'm feeling really nervous, when I see Charlie, okay, that's
Yep.
my guy.
Yep.
Then I can decompress. He and I can talk really honestly.
Yep.
I totally made a fool of myself, but I might not necessarily talk that way with Lee,
With everyone.
right?
Yep. Totally.
So, but if I see you in the hall, I'm going to go, oh, okay, Charlie's here. Like, let's go
Yep.
shoot it for a
Yep.
second,
Yeah, you can swear on this podcast, but
Okay,
yeah,
I didn't know.
that's I love it. You talk about finding your Katie at school. Go in the struggle. Go. I found a
Yes.
safe haven where we can
Yes.
share some of the experience. I love that.
Yeah. And all it is one. And that's true for college too. A lot of people have this social anxiety of what's it going to be like in college. You need one or two people.
Yep.
I mean, look at you're Ethan, right?
For
My
sure.
God.
I got a couple peeps. You know me.
Yeah.
I don't need just one. I
You
need
got a few. You got a few.
we we talk in MTCA just in general about these different buckets and ways that we help you. We help you the artistic, the organizational, strategic, psychological. They've all heard this before, right? And I think you do some dabbling in all these different buckets in different ways, right? I know, of course, different people have different needs in the process where they're lacking. Or it's one of the things that I think we do really well at MTCA is like we can adapt to fill in a la carte. What are the things that you don't have expertise in, right? But I feel like one of the biggest things that people get from you, from our coaches in general, but especially from you, is like, once they know the how to's and there's some knowledge that they might need of artistically and strategically and those kind of things, there is a bit of like cheerleading and personal handholding that I think you are so good at doing. I've watched you do that with students via email. I've just seen like that, like a lot of our students sometimes just need someone to be like, I believe in you and you've got this toward that
Mm-hmm.
Jewish. I guess I'm just interested in a little bit like for people who might eventually want to be coaches, for people who just, where do you think that came from for you in terms of your ability to be a cheerleader for other people or your aptitude toward that sort of that particular kind of cheerleading?
I think you always become who you need, right? I think there, especially at that age and during college, like I needed someone that could say, you've got this,
Yep.
like this, you're fine, you're wonderful. I just did it last night for a half hour with one of our girls, and she has my cell phone number, and I was like, you text and call me anytime throughout
Yep.
this weekend. The anxiety is high. We'll check in. I will pump you up.
Yep.
And, my goal is that you leave your time with me, whether it's 15 minutes or an hour, feeling 50% better than when we started.
Yep.
And I think it's because I needed that when
Yeah.
I was at that point in my life. I would have loved to have someone say, like, Erika, wow, are you special?
Totally.
And really mean it.
It's
And
so
like
funny that
all of our kids are.
It's so funny we don't all do that as artists. Like natural. I mean, a lot of us find an element of that in our life of what can do that for. You're gonna have a great performance. Let's go. But like athletes do that before every single game. They're smacking each other's helmets. They're hyping each other. There's weird handshakes. They're pumping each other's chest. But like they know, it's like I need that. You believe in me. I'm the greatest. Whatever. It doesn't all have to be that aggressive of an energy for an actor. But you need some self-belief and some ability to hype yourself up. That I don't know why we think actors should just be doing that all on their own without somebody helping them, especially at this age.
And I think as you become a working actor, and I mean, even in school, some of the best experiences you have are the ones where you're in an ensemble of hype men.
Yes.
Like you're all just so jazzed to be there. You're pumping each other up. You've found these friendships. This community is forever now. Like those are the best contracts and jobs.
Yes.
That's a huge part of the reason why we do this, right?
And so tough that in this process, though people do find that sometimes within their MTCA community, sometimes with their friends, but it's so tough that in this process, it is an individual one, right? Is that you don't get to walk in the room with 10 other people and hear the curtain rises and we're all together. Like it's hard that you have to do that on your own. So how do you find that element of community and that element of sort of lifting each other up so that you can all walk in and we're all going to slay today in our separate rooms as much as possible?
And again, if it's just mom or dad, or if it's a friend from home who knows nothing about auditioning, who can just text you and say like, hey, break a leg this weekend. So excited for you. Like all of that adds up. All of that is helpful.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this podcast. We're going to now record another podcast all about my cockiness. And there was another thing that we were going to try to do. We have 2 different podcasts that we're going to try to record right after this. But we'll wrap this particular episode. Anything we missed in the psychological competitiveness? Anything else that you go, I really wanted to talk about this too, from a sort of getting yourself in a competitive psychological standpoint?
No, I feel like the thesis standpoint is just like, for all of this stuff, is just like, find the warmth.
Yeah.
Find the movement that feels warm to you, the food that feels warm to you, the people that feel warm to you. The self-talk that feels genuinely good. All of that is just like, find the warmth for yourself. And you find that now, and you're going to carry it with you as an actor for your entire career. And that's fantastic.
I love that. I love that you tried to make a good sounding thesis when the thesis up to now is zhuzh your sparkle, which is just like meaningless.
No, zhuzh and sparkle.
Zhuzh and sparkle. Okay.
Zhuzh and
find your judge, find your sparkle. I feel like zhuzh is a verb. I want it to be zhuzh.
It can be anything.
Zhuzh something.
That's
it is
the
your
best
zhuzh?
part of zhuzh. Zhuzh can be anything.
My God, we love it. All right. Well, my very last question, we always try to wrap here because we have so many wonderful parent listeners. Just, I know a lot of the work that you do is directly with the parents. And we mentioned a little bit of trying to be careful not to let your anxiety take over your child. But is there anything in terms of just your advice to the parents in this process, whether it's at the early stage of the process or at Unifieds where you go, please try to do this and please try to avoid this, or anything in terms of our parent listeners?
I think my biggest thing is, don't reflect your own stuff onto your auditioning child. If you have your own anxieties and your own concerns about where the acceptance is, why haven't we heard this? Don't let them know that. Mm-hmm. Don't let them know that you're worried about that. They don't need it. Take that to someone else, another adult friend or partner. Take that to one of us.
Yep.
I talk through that stuff all the time.
Yep.
But the auditioning student has enough. They don't need that. So if you're feeling like, I'm really kind of drowning in my own worries, fine, but find someone other than the student to vent about that stuff with.
That is such good advice outside of the audition. I think it's just good parenting advice of like, don't put your stuff on your child. Like, I feel like that's all of my therapy of the past couple of years has been like, how do I not
that's why we're all in therapy,
pass this
right?
on? Like, this is mine. This is mine to hold and mine to deal with, and I don't want you to have my
Where's
stuff.
Charlie in that?
Where's Charlie in that?
Where's Charlie in that?
Erika, this was so fun. Thank you for the time today. I'm so excited to chat with you. Yeah, of course, my pleasure. Yes, Yes, yes. I really love that conversation with Erika. I love interviewing all of our guests. And of course, it's exciting for me when I see a stranger across the camera from me. But it's also particularly fun to get to do this with a dear friend, which Erika is. Just an awesome human being. Okay, so I feel like a whole bunch of that episode was a takeaway, kind of was one long takeaway, and it already were pretty long. So I'm going to try to keep this on the shorter side. Famous last words, I know. Both of the things I want to talk about relating to this question are talking about audition prep. The first is that I hope you enjoyed hearing Erika and my opposite audition stories. We said a bit of it in the episode, but if you heard that and thought to yourself, hey, wait, so should I try to go in there really confident, or should I go in there like, ooh, they're never going to accept me, so I might as well just give it a shot? I really do understand the confusion because it sounds like we're talking about really opposite audition stories. I do think professional actors will know this and recognize well that both of these are actually more similar experiences than they sound like. In the end, it all comes down to that idea of being able to release control. How tight are you gripping the wheel and trying to force the issue? The experience of like, I know this part is meant for me. I'm so prepped. I'm going to book it. Let's just go have fun manifesting that. That experience is actually shockingly similar to that feeling of, oh, this part is never going to go to me. They probably want someone like 20 years older. So let me just go in there and have a blast showing them what I would do if they did consider me, right? Both of those perspectives, they really lead from a place of freedom and release, and they enable you to have fun doing what you love, right? It's that in-between place where we care a lot, so the stakes are high, but we don't have the confidence and we don't have the belief that it's going to be us, where then we go in trying to kind of prove something or force something, and we can end up getting tight, right? That doesn't mean you can't have a good audition with a bit of gripping, with a bit of tightness, but it just doesn't enable you to do your best work if you're gripping. And then if there's too much gripping, if you're gripping really tight, if you really try to control it, then it can hinder you in a negative way. And I think all of us have had that experience as actors, right? And that leads me to the other part of audition prep I want to talk about, which is just to speak a bit more explicitly to that idea of audition nerves. I know we've done a bit of this in the past, but we didn't get as deep into this episode as I thought we might, since I know a lot of you are talking about audition nerves this time of year. Our regular listeners may have heard us. We did this as an intro or a takeaway, I think, this fall, right after Pittsburgh unifies. But for those who don't struggle directly with like generalized anxiety in life, but do struggle with audition nerves, which I know many young actors do, I just want to pass on that advice that I like to give our students about finding that specific positive relationship with your adrenaline. We talked about figuring out your general prep leading into the room, your vocal warm up, your physical warm up, your psychological warm up, et cetera. But then how everyone is different in terms of what they need for that warm up, and also different in terms of what they need right outside the room. We gave the example of whether that's push-ups or meditation is what you need. I think all of that's really true. I would just add in that however you do it, however you're trying to crest that surge of nerves or that surge of adrenaline, it is for so many actors about how you can ride the wave of your adrenaline in a productive way and not have it crash over you and overwhelm you, right? The reason that I think that metaphor is helpful is that I would urge many actors to try not to eliminate their nerves. So try not to get rid of the adrenaline. If the stakes are high because you care about the audition, the stakes are going to be high for you. That's not going to go away suddenly with some trick. And I think some actors, they kind of try to fool themselves in this like, I don't even care, which then kind of ends up being another mask, and it's trying to push down the surge of adrenaline. But then you end up feeling kind of like shut off or cold in the audition room. Sometimes, well, this kind of robotic thing, it's because an actor is trying so hard to like not be nervous. So rather than try to push it down, I would really focus on trying to harness it, right? Let that adrenaline be something that allows you to do remarkable things, which physiologically we know adrenaline is, right? You can lift a car off your child full of adrenaline. You can dunk a basketball, and you can sing, act, and dance better, pumped full of adrenaline, than you can with none of it, right? It's just when it overwhelms you into the flight response of the fight or flight that it becomes a negative. But the idea of adrenaline, of fight or flight, is not necessarily a negative. So whatever you can do to turn that adrenaline into excitement, which really it is the same thing. It is the same thing as excitement. That would be my biggest hack there, right? You're not trying to tell yourself, I don't feel nervous, I feel nothing, but instead, I don't feel nervous, I feel so excited. I can't wait to go to that audition, right? It's a much easier transition to excitement than it is to try to pretend like there's nothing there, right? Sometimes for me, that image of like imagining another wave of adrenaline when you feel it, just imagine that it can just be added beneath the fun wave that you're already riding on, right? It just drops into the ocean alongside all the other adrenaline that's already there, right? That lower wave down there, that doesn't have to affect the wave you're riding. It could lift it up if you want a little bit of a lift, but if you feel like you're in a good place with the wave, then just let it drop to the bottom, right? I think it's especially that idea of welcoming it in. Sometimes I'll literally say, thank you. Thank you for that. Give me some more, right? That idea of welcoming it in, it has the dual benefit of tricking your body into thinking it's excitement, which it is the same thing, excitement, but you can trick your body into that thought. And it also normally helps slow down the pump, right? If it's really pumping fast, to say, hey, a little bit of more, it's weird, but that act of doing that often has the opposite result of telling your body you already have enough, because it's saying, hey, I'm going in a fight. I got this. Give me all you want to give me because I'm ready to fight. And it stops your body from going into flight mode, which that can be what's not the most helpful place to audition from, right? When we're talking about this relationship with adrenaline, athletes do this all the time when they're hyping themselves up. You know, if there's a big moment on the baseball field where it's like essential that you don't get tight, every player on that field is telling themselves, I hope the ball gets hit to me, right? As soon as you switch into, I hope it doesn't, I don't want to make a game-losing error, our body flips into tightness and goes into flight mode, right? But if you tell yourself, I want to make the last out, I hope it gets hit to me, that positive self-talk, it puts yourself into that state of excitement and it will set your body up to do what it knows how to do and how to make that play, right? So it's the same thing we're always talking about. How do you fool yourself into saying, I can't wait to walk into that audition room? Maybe you don't even have to fool yourself. Maybe you can make that genuine. But if you're feeling a little bit of that flight start to kick in, tell yourself, I can't wait to walk in that audition room. I get to go next, as opposed to I have to go next. So that's a bit of specific advice that worked really well for me, which we didn't get as deep into this episode. But what we did talk about in terms of figuring out what works best for you, of course, that's crucial too, right? You know your body, you know your mind better than anyone else. I'm often talking from the athlete's perspective because that's where I come from. That may not be a perspective that's helpful for you, right? It's just the reason I'm adding this in is that your experienced coaches, they've sometimes gone through this a bit more, and they have the sense of knowing that when you're telling yourself, I don't even care about the audition, I'm not nervous, that might be a bit of a self-delusion, right? Anytime I hear a student say, I don't get nervous for auditions, I'm like, you're trying to tell me that you don't fall apart in auditions, which is great. But if you really don't get nervous, as in you don't have any adrenaline, I would question that. I'm like, I don't think most of you are auditioning right now at 17 from a completely non-adrenalized state. Some professional actors do that, where they get to the point that they're actually kind of over it. And then their problem is they need adrenaline. You want to have some adrenaline, some caring. You don't want to be completely over it. But I do not think a lot of 17, 18-year-olds are actually over it when they say that, right? But all of this, right? All of it is going toward that same goal that we've been talking about for the past month of finding joy, finding play, finding looseness, finding presentness, finding the ability to be vulnerable, right? It's all the same stuff. I'm just honoring by saying this, I'm trying to honor how hard it is to put yourself into that place realistically and how much effort and time and care that takes. Okay, we'll wrap there on another episode of Mapping the College Audition, produced by Meghan, Cordier, and Kelly Prendergast. Follow us on socials at Mapping the College Audition, where you'll see some of the excellent work of Jordan Rice and my beautiful face, which you can also find on Spotify and YouTube for this entire episode. Now, please like and subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're tempted to give us a review because you think it will put you into a positive psychological state, please go ahead and do that. And don't forget about our Meet MTCA workshop on February 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up at the link in the show notes or directly at mtca.com, where you'll also find all the information you need for your individual college process. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, I promise I'm going to shorten this mantra after the audition season, but please trust that you are enough just as you are in this moment. You'll be such a great asset to the right school, just as you are right now in your journey. Now keep going, keep striving for presentness, for vulnerability, for joy, and to discover more of your authentic artistry and to share that artistry with these fellow artists behind the table who are themselves artists and still discovering themselves. And please try to have fun along the way. Catch you next week.